Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. I still remember the day the new neighbors arrived on our colony world, and the wave of gossip that swept through our small community when it came to light that their son, Adam, didn't just have an unusual name. He was, in fact, a member of another species, a human, no less. My name is Fanick, and at the time I was just a youngling, barely 7 cycles old, with the typical brown fur of my species still soft and fluffy from youth. We lived in the residential district near the colony's main park, where the spherical homes dotted the landscape like giant pearls scattered across green velvet. It's funny how certain details stick with you. I only remember the spherical homes so clearly because Adam wouldn't stop talking about them later, fascinated by how different they were from the boring boxes humans apparently lived in. That first day I met him, I had wandered to the park after my morning lessons, my tail swishing from side to side. The playground equipment was designed for us, climbing structures that accommodated our claws, swings that balanced properly with our tails. I was practicing my climbing when I spotted him. At a first glance, I thought someone had shaved a youngling as some cruel joke. He was pink and nearly hairless, with only a dark patch on top of his head. No snout to speak of, just a flat face with a tiny nose that couldn't possibly smell anything properly. No tail for balance. His ears were rounded and stuck to the sides of his head, instead of on top where they belonged. He looked like the hairless monkeys we'd studied in class, except he wore clothes and stood upright. He was sitting alone on one of the benches, watching others play with an expression I couldn't quite read on his alien features. Something about his solitude drew me in. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe even then I recognized a kindred spirit, someone who didn't quite fit in. "Hello," I said, approaching cautiously. My parents had taught me to be polite to all colonists, though they hadn't mentioned what to do when meeting an entirely different species. His face transformed with what I later learned was a smile. "Hi, I'm Adam. Are you here to tell me to leave too?" The question caught me off guard. Why would I do that? The other kids' parents kept pulling them away when they get close. He shrugged, a gesture that looked strange without proper fur to ripple with the movement. "Mom says they just need time to get used to us." I sat down beside him, maintaining what I thought was a polite distance. "I'm Fanick. You're the human, right? The one everyone's talking about?" "That's me." He turned to face me fully, and I saw his eyes widen. Can I pet you?" The request was so unexpected I almost laughed. "Pet me? Like I'm an animal?" "Sorry, I didn't mean—" His face turned a deeper shade of pink. "It's just your fur looks so soft, and softness is good." Something in his voice, a loneliness that transcended species, made me nod. "You can do it this time." The next few moments were probably hilarious to any adult watching. 2 younglings carefully examining each other like specimens in a lab. His hands were surprisingly gentle as they stroked my arm, and he made a sound of delight that was apparently human laughter. His skin felt weird, smooth and warm, but vulnerable somehow, like he was missing a layer of protection. "Want a race?" Adam asked suddenly, bouncing on his feet. "I love running." I agreed, confident in my natural speed. We lined up at one end of the park's path, and on the count of 3, we took off. For the first few seconds, I was ahead, my 4-legged gait eating up the distance, but then Adam found his rhythm. By the time we reached the other end, he had passed me, and I was panting heavily while he seemed barely winded. How are you not tired?" I gasped, dropping to all fours to catch my breath. "Humans are good at running long distances." he said, offering what I now know was a proud grin. "Want to see something cool?" Before I could respond, he grabbed one of the lower branches of a nearby tree, a thick limb that I'd need both arms and my tail to move, and did something he called a pull-up, lifting his entire body weight with just his arms. He did it 5 times before dropping down. "That's impossible," I said. "Nah, that's nothing. Back on Earth, some humans can do hundreds of these." He flexed his arm, showing muscles that seemed disproportionately developed for someone so young. "My dad says I'll be really strong when I grow up, maybe even stronger than most of your adults. But Mom says I have to be careful and gentle here." We played for hours that day. He taught me human games like tag and hide and seek, which were surprisingly fun despite being my first time. The sun was beginning to set when I finally said I had to go home. Adam's face fell. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "Of course," I said without thinking. "This was fun." His smile returned full force. "Really? You mean it? Because the other kids—" "Never mind. Thanks, Fennec. You're the first friend I've made here." I bounded home, excited to tell my parents about my new friend, but the moment I mentioned playing with the human child, their expressions changed from indulgent interest to horror. "You did what?" My mother's fur stood on end, her tail lashing. "Fennec, do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" "But he was nice. We just played games and—" "Deathworlders are dangerous, Fennec." My father's voice was harsher than I'd ever heard it. "They're predators. Their planet is so hostile that only the most violent and aggressive species survive. That child could have killed you without even meaning to." "But he didn't. He was gentle and—" "Enough!" My mother's ears flattened against her head. "You are forbidden from interacting with that thing again. Do you understand?" I wanted to argue, to tell them how wrong they were, but the fear in their eyes silenced me. I nodded miserably and went to my room, confused and hurt. Adam hadn't seemed dangerous. He'd been lonely and kind and fun, but my parents had never lied to me before. Maybe they saw something I didn't. That night, as I lay in my sleeping nest, I kept thinking about Adam. I'd made a promise I now couldn't keep, and somehow that felt like the worst thing in the world. The days that followed my parents' decree were eye-opening in the worst possible way. What had been whispered gossip became open hostility as the community united against Adam's family. My parents used my encounter as a rallying cry, proof of the danger these humans posed to our young. They organized meetings, circulated petitions, and spoke to anyone who would listen about the need to ban Deathworlder adoption. "Can you imagine?" I heard my mother telling her friends during one of their gatherings. "That creature actually asked to touch my son, like he was examining prey, and the strength it displayed, unnatural for something that age." The other adults would shake their heads. They shared stories, each more exaggerated than the last. The human child who could bend metal, the human child who ate nothing but meat, the human child who never slept, always watching, always waiting. At school, the teachers began including safety lessons about Deathworlders. We learned about Earth, a planet of extreme temperatures, deadly predators, and poisonous plants, where only the strongest and most ruthless survived. They showed us videos of human wars, careful to emphasize the violence while glossing over the context. They explained how humans were pack hunters, how they could track prey for days without rest, how their binocular vision was designed for targeting victims. Slowly, insidiously, their fear became mine. I began to see Adam differently when I glimpsed him in the distance. Those hands that had petted me so gently, they were meant for killing. That endurance that had impressed me, it was for pursuing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. His friendly smile became a predator's grin in my mind, full of two flat teeth that could eat anything. The shame I feel now, remembering how quickly I abandoned my first impression of him, still burns. But I was young, and the adults were so certain, so united in their conviction. Surely they knew better than a naive youngling who'd been lucky to escape unharmed. When my friends whispered about the monster living in our district, I nodded along. When they crossed the street to avoid him, I followed. When they made plans to protect our territory from the invader, I participated eagerly. Looking back, I can see how masterfully the adults manipulated us. They turned our natural protectiveness, our childhood cruelty, into a weapon against a family that had done nothing but try to fit in. And we, stupid children that we were, became their eager soldiers in a war against a boy who just wanted friends. The months that followed were a campaign of exclusion that makes me sick to remember. We made it our mission to keep Adam away from anywhere we claimed as ours, which was everywhere. The playground became our fortress, defended with snarls and threats whenever he approached. No furless freaks allowed became our rallying cry. We thought we were so clever, identifying the most obvious difference and turning it into an insult. "Better run home before winter comes, human. Oh wait, you'll be dead by then without any fur." Adam never responded to our taunts at first. He'd just turn away and find somewhere else to be. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of his face before he left, and the hurt there should have told me everything I needed to know about who the real monsters were. Years passed like this. We grew older, our tactics more sophisticated. We learned his schedule and made sure to be obstacles in his path. We whispered loud enough for him to hear whenever he was forced to be near us in class. We created elaborate jokes about hairless monkeys and practiced them until the delivery was perfect, the laughter automatic. Despite our best efforts, Adam found friends among the few families who didn't buy into the hysteria. There were always some colonists who had a favorable impression of humanity, who judged individuals by their actions, rather than their species. Watching Adam laugh with them, seeing him included in their games and conversations, filled me with a rage I couldn't name then, but recognized now as jealousy. I had been his first friend. He had chosen me, approached me, shared his wonder with me, and I had thrown it away for the approval of adults who were frightened of a kid. That others had the courage I lacked, that they defied social pressure to do what was right, it shamed me. And because I couldn't face that shame, I transformed it into anger at Adam, as if it was his fault I was a coward. My friends and I escalated our harassment whenever we caught him alone. We accidentally bumped into him in hallways, using our greater numbers to send him stumbling. We'd claim equipment he was using, citing colony rules that didn't exist about species-appropriate activities. He never fought back, never reported us, never even raised his voice. He'd just look at us with those strange human eyes and continue on his way. If Adam would just act like the predator we said he was, we'd be heroes instead of bullies. But he never gave us that satisfaction. Year after year, he resisted our abuse. His adoptive parents must have told him about not using violence, about not giving his tormentors the reaction they wanted, or maybe he was just a better person than any of us, even then. Adolescence brought changes. Our fur darkened and thickened, our muscles developed, our voices deepened, and suddenly the dynamic shifted. Adam's family had proven as boring and normal as any other, paying their taxes, contributing to the colony, causing no trouble. Without constant reinforcement, some of my peers began to question why we were still tormenting Adam. That's when she appeared, Lyra, a new student whose family had just transferred from another district. She had glossy fur and bright eyes and no preconceived notions about humans. When she was assigned as Adam's lab partner in biology, she treated him like any other classmate. They laughed together over failed experiments. She asked him about Earth. She didn't flinch when their hands accidentally touched passing equipment. The sight of them together, casual, friendly, normal, ignited something vicious in our group. How dare she treat him like he belonged? Did she know what he was? Didn't she understand the danger? "She's like the freak," Craddock sneered during lunch, watching them across the cafeteria. "Look at her, acting like he's not a hairless aberration."
"Someone needs to remind her what team she's on,"
Zyke added, cracking his knuckles. He'd grown into the largest of our group, his bulk making him our unofficial enforcer. "And remind him of his place," I said, the words tasting bitter even as I spoke them. "He's getting too comfortable, too bold." We waited until after school, following Adam to the fields where students often gathered to relax. He was alone, sitting under a tree with a human book. Perfect. We surrounded him in a semicircle, cutting off escape routes. He looked up slowly, marking our positions with those predator eyes, and carefully closed his book. "Fennec," he said, and hearing him say my name after so many years was jarring. "What do you want?" "We saw you with Lyra," I said, stepping forward. "Getting pretty friendly with her, weren't you?" "We're lab partners." His voice was calm, but I noticed his muscles tensing, preparing. "Lab partners?" Craddock mocked. "Is that what humans call it when they're hunting?" "I think the hellish freak needs a reminder," Zyke growled, flexing his claws, "about staying away from our kind." Adam stood slowly, brushing off his clothes. He was taller than most of us now, his human growth spurt giving him reach. But we had numbers, claws, and righteous fury on our side. How could one human stand against 4 of us? "I don't want to fight you," Adam said quietly. "We're about to graduate. Can't we just leave each other alone?" "Afraid?" I taunted, my tail lashing. "Big bad death world is scared of a few prey species?" Something shifted in his expression. For just a moment, I saw a flash of the predator we'd always claimed he was. Not in cruelty or bloodlust, but in focus, in calculation, in the cool assessment of threats. Then it was gone, replaced by resignation. "Fine," he said. "But remember, you started this." The fight that followed shattered every assumption we'd built our harassment on. We'd grown up believing our own propaganda, thinking humans were strong but clumsy, dangerous but slow. We expected to overwhelm him with numbers and natural weapons. We were wrong. Craddock charged first, counting on his speed. Adam sidestepped at the last second, using Craddock's momentum against him. A quick pivot, a precisely placed foot, and Craddock went tumbling face first into the dirt, knocked unconscious by the impact. Zyke roared and lunged, claws extended. He managed to rake Adam's arm, drawing blood, but Adam didn't even flinch. Instead, he grabbed Zyke's wrist, twisted with that human strength we'd mocked for years, and brought his elbow up to Zyke's snout. The crack was audible. Zyke dropped, clutching his broken nose, whimpering. I'd love to tell you about my heroic part in the fight, how I lasted longest or landed the best hits. The truth is, I was next, and I don't even remember what happened. One moment I was lunging forward, thinking I could bite his shoulder while he was distracted. The next, I was waking up to concerned medics checking my pupils. Apparently, Adam had kicked me in the side of the head when I tried to bite him, a perfectly placed strike that dropped me without causing permanent damage. The last of our group, Merrick, had the good sense to surrender after seeing the 3 of us down in less than 30 seconds. Adam stood in the center of our fallen group, blood dripping from the scratches on his arm, breathing heavily but still combat-ready. When security arrived, called by concerned bystanders, they found him waiting calmly while medics tended to us.
"He attacked us!"
Zyke lisped through his broken snout.
"The human went crazy!"
Adam didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just let them lead him away, his silence more damning than any protest. After all, who would believe the Death Welder was innocent when 4 injured locals said otherwise? I went home that day to find my parents practically glowing with pride. They'd already heard about the fight. News traveled fast in our small community, and in their minds, I was a hero who'd stood up to the dangerous human and lived to tell about it. "We always knew this would happen," my mother said, tending to the bruise on my head with gentle hands. "Death Welders can't control their violent nature forever. You're lucky to be alive, my brave boy." My father clasped my shoulder, his grin firm with approval. "The Council will have to act now. 4 of you injured. That human has shown his true colors. By tomorrow, he'll be gone, and our colony will be safe again." They prepared my favorite meal, invited relatives to hear the story, treated me like I'd survived some great battle. And all the while, I felt sick. The food tasted like ash. The congratulations sounded like condemnations, because I knew the truth. We'd cornered him, outnumbered him, forced him to defend himself, and he'd still held back. That night, I lay in my nest staring at the ceiling, replaying the fight over and over. Not the violence, but the moment before, when Adam had said, "I don't want to fight you." I thought about all the years of harassment, all the times we'd made his life miserable, all the opportunities for him to retaliate that he'd never taken. I thought about that first day in the park, when a lonely human boy had just wanted a friend, and I'd been too weak to stand by him when it mattered. The next morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. Despite my parents' protests, I marched down to the colony security office. The officer on duty, a bored-looking male who'd probably hoped for a quiet shift, perked up when he saw me. I confessed to the officer that my friends and I attacked Adam, not the other way around, admitting years of harassment fueled by prejudice and fear. Despite knowing the consequences, I told the truth. Adam had only defended himself. My honesty led to confrontations with my friends, hours of paperwork, and, worst of all, the crushing disappointment of my parents, who couldn't understand why I would defend someone they saw as a creature. But I knew the truth. Adam was a person, and we had been the real monsters all along. The next few hours were a mixture of repeated statements, angry confrontations with my co-conspirators, and forms to fill out. By the time I got home, my parents had already heard. The look of betrayal on their faces was almost unbearable. "How could you?" My mother's voice was cold. "Defending that creature over your own kind." What followed was the worst month of my youth. My parents alternated between fury and disappointment. My former friends treated me like a traitor. The community that had embraced me now whispered when I passed. But the strange thing was, I felt lighter than I had in years. The crushing weight of maintaining a lie, of being someone I wasn't, had finally lifted. It took me weeks to work up the courage to approach Adam. I found him at the same tree where we'd fought, reading another human book. He tensed when he saw me coming, and I raised my hands in what I hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "I just want to talk," I said. "To apologize." He studied me for a moment, then nodded to the ground beside him. I sat carefully, leaving space between us. "I testified," I said without preamble. "Told them the truth about the fight, about everything." "I know." His voice was neutral. "They released me and dropped the charges." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but I pressed on. "Not just for the fight, for all of it. Every cruel thing I said, every time I made your life harder, every moment I chose them over what I knew was right." Silence stretched between us. Then, unexpectedly, Adam smiled, the same warm expression from our first meeting. "I forgive you, Fanick." "Just like that?" I couldn't hide my shock. "After everything?" He shrugged. "Yeah. I should have done it years ago. That first day in the park," my voice caught. "I still remember it. You were my first real friend, even if it was just for an afternoon." "Mine too," Adam said softly. "First person on this planet who saw me as just another kid." We talked for hours that day. He told me about Earth, about human culture, about the challenges of growing up between two worlds. I shared my own struggles, the suffocating weight of expectations, the fear of standing out. By the time the sun set, it felt like no time had passed at all, like we were those two younglings in the park again, discovering each other with wonder instead of fear. The years that followed were the best of my youth. Though looking back, we were absolutely reckless idiots. Adam introduced me to human concepts like pranks and dares, which when combined with alien biology and teenage stupidity, resulted in spectacular disasters. There was the time we decided to see if my claws could help me climb the outside of the tallest municipal building. They could, but getting down was another matter entirely. The fire department was not amused. Or when Adam bet me I couldn't eat an entire jar of human hot sauce. I could, but my digestive system staged a violent protest that had me bedridden for 2 days. The fireworks incident, though, that was legendary. Adam had learned to make rudimentary explosives in his chemistry class, and decided our graduation deserved proper celebration. We snuck out at night with a bag full of homemade rockets and set them off in the field behind the residential district. The display was magnificent. Bright flowers of light blooming against the stars, echoing booms that rattled windows. It was also incredibly illegal and woke up half the colony.
What in the 7 moons is happening?
The elder who lived nearest the field burst out of his home, fur standing completely on end. Adam and I looked at each other, covered in soot and surrounded by incriminating evidence, and did the only sensible thing. We ran. We made it about 50 meters before colony security caught us. The officer who arrested us was the same one I'd given my statement 2 years earlier. He shook his head as he put us in restraints. Somehow, he said dryly, I'm not surprised it's you two. We spent the night in holding. Then were sentenced to 200 hours of community service, which we spent cleaning public spaces while enduring lectures about responsibility and setting an example. Our parents were furious. Adam's because he'd proven the xenophobes right about humans being disruptive. Mine because I'd chosen a human as my partner in crime. But we didn't care. For the first time in both our lives, we had real friendship. The kind where you could be your authentic self without fear. Adam helped me understand that blindly following rules wasn't always right, that sometimes disrupting the status quo was necessary. Of course, nothing good lasts forever. As we reached official adulthood, Adam grew restless. He spent his whole life on our colony, raised by parents who'd done their best but couldn't teach him about his own species. Questions plagued him. Why had he been put up for adoption? What was Earth really like? Where did he truly belong? I have to go, Adam told me one evening, as we sat on the roof of my family's home watching the sunset. The human embassy is offering repatriation assistance. They'll help me find my biological family, get me settled on Earth. My tail drooped despite my efforts to control it. For how long? I don't know. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Maybe forever. I need to understand where I came from, Fennec. I love my parents, love this colony, but there's this emptiness, like I'm missing pieces of myself. I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but I understood. How could I not? I'd spent years surrounded by my own kind while he'd been alone. He deserved the chance to experience his own culture, to find others like him. When do you leave? Next month. We made the most of those final weeks, revisiting old haunts and creating new memories. The night before his departure, we climbed back to that rooftop one last time. Promise me something, I said, fighting the tightness in my throat. Don't let Earth change who you are. You're the best person I know, human or otherwise. Promise me something too, he replied. Don't go back to being who they want you to be. The galaxy needs more people willing to stand up for what's right. We didn't say goodbye the next morning, just clasped hands, fur against skin, and nodded. Some friendships transcend words. The years that followed Adam's departure were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without his steadying influence, I found myself struggling with old patterns. The rebellious streak he'd awakened in me remained, but without his wisdom to temper it, I often pushed too far. I'd argue with authority figures just to argue, reject social norms without considering their purpose, alienate potential friends with my intensity. My own species found me difficult, too influenced by human ideas, too willing to question tradition, too intense about justice and fairness. Dating was a disaster. My parents, still nursing their disappointment over my friendship with Adam, suggested military service might straighten me out. For once, their advice proved helpful, though not in the way they intended. The military's rigid structure paradoxically gave me freedom. Clear rules meant clear boundaries to work within. Physical challenge channeled my restless energy. Most importantly, I found purpose in protecting others, even if some of those others were species my parents still feared. I excelled at training, my years of keeping up with a human having pushed my physical capabilities beyond most of my species. The discipline I'd learned from watching Adam control his strength served me well in combat exercises, but it was my psychological profile that caught the attention of recruitment officers for the Galactic forces.
Says here you have extensive experience with humans,
the interviewer noted, reviewing my file.
Comfortable with high-gravity species in general?
Yes, sir. My best friend is human.
Interesting.
He made a note.
We've been having integration issues with human recruits. Someone who can bridge that gap would be valuable.
That's how I became an unofficial human liaison for my unit. When human soldiers joined our mixed species forces, I was the one who helped them adjust, who translated cultural concepts, who mediated conflicts. My fellow soldiers thought I was crazy for volunteering to bunk near the humans, for eating meals with them, for treating them as equals rather than potential threats.
"The Death Worlders,"
one of my bunkmates whispered after I'd spent an evening teaching human recruits our card games.
"Don't you feel unsafe?"
The only thing unsafe is ignorance, I replied, shuffling the deck. Fear what you don't understand, and you'll spend your whole life afraid. Working with humans taught me even more about Adam's remarkable restraint. These soldiers, trained for combat, could bend metal with their bare hands, run for hours without rest, and see in near darkness. Yet they were also homesick kids who missed their families, who struggled with alien food, who just wanted to fit in. They reminded me so much of Adam that it hurt. Years passed. I rose through the ranks, my unique position making me invaluable for joint operations. I served on dozens of worlds, saw the best and worst the galaxy had to offer, but I never stopped thinking about my friend, wondering where he was, if he'd found what he was looking for. Then, during a routine transfer to a new posting, I found myself on a transport that stopped at Earth's primary spaceport. I had a 3-day layover, standard bureaucracy, and was preparing for boredom when a familiar voice called out.
"Fennec? Is that really you?"
I spun around, and there he was, older, broader, with lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and stress in equal measure, but unmistakably Adam. The reunion was a collision of laughter and exclamations, drawing amused looks from passing travelers. We had so much to catch up on that Adam immediately declared he was taking personal time to show me Earth.
"You can't visit humanity's homeworld and not get the proper tour,"
he insisted, practically dragging me out of the spaceport.
"Especially not from some random guide who doesn't know you."
The 3 days that followed were a whirlwind. Adam showed me New York's towering buildings that made our spherical homes look quaint, took me to eat foods that ranged from delicious to "why would you put that in your mouth?" and introduced me to the ocean. But it was the quiet moments between adventures where we really reconnected. He told me about finding his biological mother, learning she'd been just 16 when she had him, too young and poor to provide care. How she'd cried when they met, apologizing for a choice that had given him loving parents and opportunities she never could have provided. He spoke of regularly visiting his adoptive family, and how he was struggling to fit into human society after a lifetime among my people, of being too alien for Earth, but too human for anywhere else. "Funny thing is," he said as we watched the sunset from a place called the Golden Gate Bridge, "I realized home isn't about species or planets. It's about people. My parents, the colony, you. That's home." I told him about my military service, about defending the same ideals of integration his adoption represented, about the humans I'd helped adjust to galactic life.
He laughed when I described teaching a group of human marines to properly groom their fur. Excuse me, hair, to meet regulations. You became what I always knew you could be, he said. Someone who sees people, not just species. When my transport left, Adam was heading back too. Not permanently. He had built a life on Earth, but regularly. His adoptive parents were aging, and he was determined to be there for them as they'd been there for him. They saved me, he said simply, from what might have been a very different life. How do you repay that? We kept in better touch after that, messages flying across the light years. I attended his wedding 5 years later, standing as what humans call a best man, while my parents watched in bewilderment. His wife, a biochemist named Maya, took my presence in stride.
Adam's told me so much about you,
she said, shaking my hand carefully.
Thank you for being his friend when it mattered most.
Years later, when Adam's adoptive parents grew frail, I took leave to help care for them. The same beings who'd faced community censure for loving a human child now had both that child and his alien friend, ensuring their comfort. Adam's mother would hold my furred hands and his smooth ones, tears in her eyes.
Our boys,
she whispered.
Our brave boys.
The biggest lesson I learned from my strange, wonderful friendship with Adam was that following society's rules isn't always right, but moderation and self-control matter just as much. You have to know when to rebel and when to respect, when to push boundaries and when to honor them. Adam taught me courage. I helped teach him restraint. Together, we found balance. My only regret is that I didn't learn these lessons sooner. I think about those lost years, the friendship we could have had, the pain we might have avoided. But Adam, with typical human optimism, sees it differently. We needed those experiences, he told me once. They made us who we are, and who we are is pretty good, don't you think? He's right, of course. That human usually is.